Welcome to the Shekina Meditation Podcast, created by Shekina community members. Shekina communities are dedicated to creating free devotional spaces of Christian practice for spiritual seekers and travelers around the world. We post Christ-centered guided meditation each week to help you in your personal or small group practice. You can find episode show notes and other information at shekinacommunity.com.
Hello, this is Ro.
And this is Ray.
This is week 38 of the podcast. It's Thursday, the 20th of June. We're sitting in one of the little nooks in the garden looking at some very tall mulberry bushes as we record this.
Listeners, this podcast is supported by you.
By you.
Because this podcast is about meditation, we want to keep it ad-free. Our beloved patrons at patreon.com support us for as little as $1 a month, and patrons get extra audio every month. You can find us at patreon.com/Shekina Meditation Podcast.
Supporting this podcast helps to keep Shekina communities running and free for travelers and spiritual seekers. And it helps us know that you appreciate what we're doing in putting this little podcast out into the world.
Yes, thank you.
Patrons, you guys, you support us. It's amazing. You're the best.
You're the best. We really, really appreciate it.
We do. You're as delicious as Manao flavored ice cream.
What's Manao, Ro? What flavor is that?
That is a Thai word. It is lemon or lime.
Lemon or lime?
And lemon and lime.
Yeah, It's kind of the same thing here.
Mm-hmm. You would think that limey flavored ice cream would be gross. Like not gelato, I mean creamy ice cream, but it is so good.
Delicious.
Yeah.
I want to add here that one thing we could really use is some ratings and reviews on iTunes.
Yes.
We really need, if you guys are listeners on iTunes, just press those little star buttons and give us a rating, and that will help us so much. I think we're at the point when collecting those will help a lot with visibility and being able to share. And share with your friends too.
Definitely.
Let people know when you're listening to us. We could really use some more listeners, and we would love to share more meditation with the world.
Definitely. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. What's been going on, Ro?
Well, this week's been pretty delightful at Shekina Garden. We had a special workshop this week on Tuesday morning. We had an embodiment workshop. So it was run by Naomi, and it was trying to use movement meditation and music and dance and stretching and just some anatomy stuff and some information about psychology and all that sort of thing to kind of push back against the idea that our bodies are bad. We kind of had this hangover from Greek thinking. I think that's where it comes from in our society, where spirit is good, mind is good, thought is good, theology in the brain is good, or even in the heart, but the body is bad. It just leads us towards sin and temptation, and there's nothing good to do with the body. But this session was all about how we experience God in our bodies. Like a beautiful phrase that she used was our bodies are our soul's address. It's where we are. It's how we experience God. So it was a really gorgeous workshop. There was maybe about a half a dozen of us. So we had lots of space in the sala, and we moved and danced and stretched and
that sounds amazing.
kind of rolled around a bit on the floor. But basically, it might have looked a bit funny, but basically we were all just thinking about how our bodies can be good and like smiling towards our bodies and having like, a different attitude. It was really, really lovely. And yeah, everyone who was there was like, we've got to do this more often. Let's make this monthly. Or
My mind instantly goes towards theology and like the idea of like how some of those ideas came in with Gnostic theology,
Exactly.
like heresies. You know what I mean about the spirit and the body, and then also, Hebrew thought is so earthly and bodily.
That's
like
right.
it's so oriented around things that we do, like eating and sleeping and fasting and drinking, all things that we do with our bodies. So.
Yeah, and we thought a bit as well about how, like, God was known to us by coming in a body. Jesus is how we know God so intimately because he was a real guy who walked around in a body, and his body wasn't just pure evil. He was God. So we thought about that too, and that was really powerful. It was a really great workshop.
That sounds amazing.
How about you, Ray? Tell me about your week. It's been a bit wild for you guys.
Yeah, we had our yearly immigration appointment this week where we had to go and renew our visas. And it was trying.
Yep.
We had a full day of not really accomplishing anything in the office, but we were in the office for the full day. And then the next day we had 10 hours sitting in the office trying to get it through.
This is not just you and Chin, right? This is the whole family.
The whole family sitting in the office. So Chinua and I and our 5 kids sitting there waiting and trying to get our visas to go through. And in the end it was successful, but it was very adventurous along the way. We were staying in a little guest house because it's in a town that's about 2.5 hours away.
Yeah.
A beautiful town, like sleepy little town, so cute. But yeah, staying in a guest house that was, a bit funky. Our office manager Sarah immediately made friends with the owners of the guest house because they were Karen as well. So I said to her, "You make friends so easily," and she was like, "Oh, they're Karen as well." Like that's as easy as it gets, like we connect on that level. So that was cool. But then Solomon slipped and fell on the tiles and was just like bleeding everywhere. And so we're doing these little operations trying to make butterfly bandages for him. And then Leafy's phone fell into a sewer that at a restaurant that was under the seating, and so then we had to get the restaurant people to like open up the seating to get the phone back out, and there was people at the restaurant helping us. There's just all these little funny adventures along the way. And all part of the trip. And at one point Leafy said, "Nothing has gone right with this trip at all," because he was really upset about losing his phone. And so then I had to really think about what did go right. And yeah, there were so many beautiful moments standing and looking at the mountains, and I got all my words written. I'm writing, and so I would, every time I could, I would just pull out the computer. So I did some words sitting on the curb outside of a Tesco Lotus convenience store. I did some words sitting outside the copy shop. I did a lot sitting in immigration. And just, I don't know, just like, I guess some of these things, like when you're in bureaucracy or when you're in the system and it feels deathly, it feels like, what is the point of all of this? And why are these people... Why do they have authority over me? Like, I really, like, my heart really pushes back against that. But I think when I'm in that, I always come back to the realization that this is not what life is about. Like, so thankful that actually God is, like, I was looking at the hills and thinking about God creating the trees. And it just pulled me out of the whole thing. I was like, that's really where, like, power and sweetness and goodness comes from, is this beautiful creative heart of God, and it can't be tamed by paperwork. So yeah, so in a nutshell, that was how it went.
Wild week. So it's really good to have you guys back in town and back in the garden, and Chinua's working in the workshop today, and you've been doing some weeding with me, and it's good to have you guys back here.
It's good to be back.
I also have a little update from another one of our Shekina communities, also in Asia. Laura was in touch with me and told me that those guys have had a devotion circle recently about clouds. Meditating on clouds and seeing like all the different times in the Bible that clouds are mentioned, and sometimes how it can be like an embodiment of God, like and the cloud comes on the temple and those sorts of things. And then they did some cloud watching. I
That's
want to
really
do that
fun.
here.
We should totally
I think
take
it's
that.
so beautiful.
Yeah.
And then there's been some movement meditations. Millie's been running some outside of the community, like outside of the ashram space, like renting bigger rooms so that she can run movement meditations, which is super cool.
That is very cool.
They've had some sweet community lunches, and they also were talking about giving cake out on the path. So like making cake and just giving it out to people on the path by their place.
Sweethearts.
Sounds so nice. And Laura's also had some time recently, took some time off from community life to record an album.
Wow.
Yeah, so we look forward to being able to share that with all you guys.
Oh yeah, that'll be amazing.
Once it's out in the world, we'll make sure that we link it up.
Well, today's episode is a contemplation of nature meditation guided by you, Ro, and recorded at Shekina Garden in Thailand. You'll need to find a piece of nature to observe during the meditation. You can do that before, or you can pause partway through. I think you instruct people, and Ro instructs people during the meditation to stop and find something. So if you want to wait and look for something at that point, or you can come ready already. It can be something that you can hold in your hand, some little piece of nature like a leaf or a stone, or something that you can see or feel from where you sit, like the wind or a tree or a mountain. The meditation will have 3 parts. During the first, Ro will help you prepare to move into a quiet place in your heart. Then she will guide you through some questions about your object.
And for the third part, you can process your experience. So either by journaling, or perhaps if you're meditating in a small group, you could be sharing with others. We find it's a good practice to listen well to each other without interrupting or correcting each other. So maybe using a talking stick and passing that around the circle can be helpful, and just listening as each person has the stick.
Let's begin.
Welcome to meditation this morning. Today we're going to do a nature meditation. We will spend a few moments to begin with just finding some stillness in our bodies and our minds, and I'll lead you through just a few little exercises to help our minds and bodies calm down and get ready to listen to God. Then I'll invite us to find an object from nature. So when we do that, we can stand up if we want to, go out into the garden, pick something up, something small that you can pick up with your hand, or you can find something large like a tree or a mountain that's in the distance, something that you can look at. Or you can even choose something that's invisible. That's totally fine as well. I just say go with your first instinct, or whatever is something that stands out to you from nature, just a simple object. Then I'll ask a series of questions on that object and leave a lot of silence in between. I just invite you during this meditation to be very open to what might happen with the meditation, very maybe relaxed in your mind as to any expectations of what might happen, perhaps entering into a bit of a play state, a bit of a childlike approach to the meditation. We can use our imaginations, we can find little memory lanes to wander down in our minds, we can explore images that might come up in our minds. Just being ready to explore and listen and play and zoom around in our minds in there and see what happens. There's basically what I'm saying is there's no wrong way to do this kind of meditation. So feel very free. Then the third part of our meditation, we will share a talking circle just to share with each other what happened for us during the meditation time. So to begin with, let's find a comfortable position. Take a few nice deep breaths. Maybe sighing them out if that helps you relax a little more. You can take any little stretches that you might need just to settle your body in to a moment of stillness. There's no rules about sitting in a particular position or staying still during this kind of meditation, but to begin with, let's find a position that we can hold for a little while in stillness, just to help our minds to focus. We're going to draw our attention towards our breath to begin with. Not changing how we breathe, but just noticing what happens when we breathe. Noticing the sensation of air rushing in our nostrils, then the sensation of our belly and our chest moving and rising, and then falling again, the air rushing out our nostrils. And perhaps seeing if you can notice that little pause between the exhale and the inhale, where we breathe in And breathe out. And then there's a little pause, a 3-part rhythm. And then the inhalation begins again. You might like to use your imagination to trace the path of your breath. Rushing in, filling the lungs. Then even maybe imagining the bloodstream becoming oxygenated by that breath. And the effects of that breath carried by the blood running all around the body, to the tips of fingers, the soles of our feet. This amazing system, constantly happening all day and all night. Right now we get to just pay attention to it for a moment. And as we breathe, perhaps using our breath to bring a little bit more relaxation to our bodies. You might notice any part of your body that perhaps feels a little sore or tense. Maybe a place where you're holding on to the muscles. Common places for this are our hips, our shoulders, our neck, our jaw, even our face. Let's take a moment to imagine sending our breath to any of these parts of the body that we feel might be a little tense or a little tight. And using the breath to let those muscles just relax and release, just a little more than they are. See if you can let your shoulders just hang a little looser. Check in with your jaw. Are you clenching it at all? If so, just let it go a little more. Using our breath just to relax and surrender. as we find stillness and quietness and relaxation in our bodies, sometimes that means we can notice that our minds are possibly not quite as relaxed, not quite as still. The purpose of this meditation isn't to empty our minds completely, but to begin with, it's nice to find some stillness, some quietness in our mind. So we're going to take a few moments to notice what's happening on the inside, our thoughts, our emotions. You might like to imagine that your thoughts are like clouds that are floating by. You're looking up into the sky and noticing them. We don't need to judge them or interact with them particularly. We're just noticing them floating by. Perhaps taking a playful attitude towards them. Just noticing each one. As you notice these thoughts and feelings floating by, you might like to imagine that the clouds in the sky that you're looking at are perhaps becoming less frequent, or maybe are beginning to dissolve as clouds do in the sky. Maybe they're just floating further and further away. Whatever they are, concerns, worries, things to do, things that have happened, we can just let them float off into the distance. They don't need to trouble us during this meditation time today. We can just let them float away for the time being. You might like to imagine that the sky above you is almost totally clear of clouds now. Or you might like to imagine that with your breath, you can blow the last of those clouds away. So that's all that's left above you is just clear blue sky. It's normal during our meditation for thoughts to come back into our mind and distract us. When that happens, let's not beat ourselves up, but just notice that that's happening. And perhaps again return to this still, quiet space where we can just easily blow those thoughts away with our breath. The practice of meditation is just the practice of returning to this focus, returning to this place of quiet, stillness, readiness of listening towards the divine. In a moment, I'll invite us to perhaps stand up, go for a walk and find our object from nature. Just invite you to do this in silence and to do this remaining in this thoughtful, quiet state of being. Feel free, again, just to pick up something small, like a leaf or a rock, or find something larger that you can look at with your eyes in the distance, or even choose something that is unseen, but that you can imagine, that you can perhaps feel with another sense. And we'll know that it's time to begin the next part of our meditation when everyone is seated back here. Feel free now to stand up, go and find your object. So to begin with, let's explore our object from nature with all our senses. We'll take a couple of minutes to do this. Smell it, touch it, taste it if that's not dangerous. Is it making any noise? What can you hear? Use all the senses and perhaps imagine you're like a little kid who's seeing this object for the first time. See what you can find out about it. As we move on towards our questions, feel free to put your object down and let your eyes be closed. Or if it helps you to focus, leave your eyes open and keep exploring your object with your senses, with your hands, whatever's helpful for you. So our first question this morning is, how are this element of nature and I connected? How do we connect? How are we connected, this element from nature and I? Our next question is, how are we the same? This element from nature and I. How are we the same or very similar? How are we the same? This object from nature and I? How are we similar? Our next question is, how are we different? The object from nature that I've chosen and I. How are we different? The next question is, how is my object from nature and God connected? How are they connected? This object from nature and God. The next question is, how is the object or element from nature the same as God, or very similar? How is the object from nature that I've chosen the same as God or very similar. And our last question is, how is the element of nature that I've chosen different to God? How is this object from nature different to God? We can begin now to bring our attention back to the here and now. Beginning to step away from the questions that we've been pondering. I invite you to slowly return to the company of others and to a space of being ready to share. Take your time to come back, and we'll know we're ready to share when everyone is seated with their eyes open.
When you are ready, take a few deep breaths and begin your time of journaling or sharing with others. Thank you for joining today. There will be a new guided meditation each week, so don't forget to subscribe on iTunes or sign up for our newsletter to get podcasts delivered to your inbox at www.shekinacommunity.com/podcast newsletter. Have a beautiful week. Blessings to you.